I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I served in the United States Army from July of 1969 until January of 1972. Within my 3-year career within the United States Army, I served 12 months in the Republic of South Vietnam.
That's a long time, isn't it?
It was like a 1-year rotation, which was the norm during that time.
Oh, okay. All right. At that time, and to put it in perspective for us, what was it like in South Vietnam?
I was actually stationed at a place that was called Landing Zone Dottie. Landing Zone Dottie was located about 10 miles south of a place that was called Chu Lai. And the base that I was assigned to was primarily responsible for providing artillery support for members of the infantry division. The unit I was assigned to was Company B, 39th Combat Engineers. Our primary responsibility was to build things, destroy things, and also to do what we call mine sweeps along the major highway, which was called QL1.
Mine sweeps?
Yes. And what I mean by that is that you couldn't allow trucks and people to travel along this highway until you went out around about 5 o'clock in the morning and conducted mine sweeps to make sure the roads were safe. It's the same thing that military soldiers do now in Afghanistan and Iraq.
And how did you do that? Gosh, that sounds super stressful, scary, the highest level.
It
Like
was
a bomb detonator type
it was
of thing?
right. It was an improvised, you plant something that's called an improvised explosive device or something like that. But after you've done it a couple of times, you get used to it. It was the norm, and you got used to doing that.
How would you know if something was live or suspicious?
You had to rely on your training, the experience, and what you suspected as being something that's out of place.
You must have seen some pretty harsh stuff, and if I'm treading in areas you don't want me to, I can stop.
Yes, there were some things that stick with us veterans that we never forget. Anything that dealt with death and destruction and so forth, you never get it out of your head. It's always there.
Yeah. And you served with the Richmond Police Department.
Yes, I was, when I came out of the United States Army, shortly after that, probably within a year's time after I got out, because I didn't get right out of the military when I came back from Vietnam. I was actually stationed at Fort George D. Maryland. And then when I got out of the military in Maryland, I came to Richmond. And less than a year later, I took a job working for the Richmond Police Department. And I was able to work my way up. I worked in some of the best divisions in the world, from the homicide unit to forensics to special operations and so forth. And the reason why I went to the police department was basically because I liked the idea of having the structure. It was semi-military. And all of us understood that it was a semi-military type of organization. And that's what I needed in my life. I needed that structure. It's almost as like when in the military we would say that, we was like a band of brothers and sisters. It was the same thing within the police department. It was that band of brothers and sisters. Like I was saying, that connection, a feeling of belonging to an organization.
And were you part, or you headed the hostage negotiation
I was a member of the hostage negotiation team. And at one time I headed the detective division for the Richmond Police Department. And then I also headed the organized crime section for the Richmond Police Department.
And being in police and seeing what you see, the worst of humanity sometimes, when you see the victims, is, and I'm not trying to cause something that you didn't feel, but I'm trying to ask, did it trigger anything, or were you just so numb to seeing death that it didn't faze you?
A lot of times it didn't faze me. Because you got to the point where, particularly going back, I have to go back to the military. When I was in Vietnam, I was 19 years of age. And when I left Vietnam, I think I had just turned 20. The first time I saw death was when I was in Vietnam. So to see death on the police department, it really was just like, I was basically numb. It was no effect. It had what I thought little or no effect on me. And I found out later on that I was totally wrong.
Expand on that.
What I mean by that is that in Vietnam, when you saw someone who was shot or someone who had been killed or something like that, you felt within yourself that if you didn't kill them, that they would kill you. So it was either you or them, and that was the mentality that I basically had. When I returned home and I joined the police department and so forth, it was totally different, because a lot of people that you saw that had been killed or something like that, they were totally innocent people who had done nothing wrong, yet someone decided that they wanted to take their person's life. And the hardest part about that, I don't care whether it was a death that occurred in Vietnam or a death that occurred on the streets of Richmond, the most impactful ones that you will always remember is those that involved a child. And when you think about it, me being at the age of 19, I was old enough to carry a gun. I was old enough to carry a hand grenade. I was old enough to carry an M60 machine gun, but I wasn't old enough to buy a beer. That's the way we were looked at. You know, we were still children when it came to walk into a place and say, I want to buy a glass of wine or to get a drink. We were too young for that, but we were old enough to go off to fight someone else's children, because the people that we encountered in Vietnam was basically the same age that we were or younger. We were children fighting children.
But what was it like to come back to civilian life? Now granted, you did say that you were still in the military, but just coming back home from being in Vietnam to the States.
Coming back to the United States from Vietnam, it was an eye-opener. And to be honest with you, I was not prepared to come back to the United States. When the plane landed in California, we were immediately taken into a building. We were told to take a shower. We were going to change clothes. We were going to eat a meal. They put us in a Class A uniform, and they told us that, okay, you can leave now and go to the airport. By the way, while you're en route to the airport, you're going to encounter people that's not going to like you. I never encountered one attempting to spit on me or anything like that, but at the airport, what I would always remember is that people called us baby killers and warmongers. That's the way that we were approached at the airport. There was no marching band. There were no family members. There was no one there to meet us at the airport. No one of a high command from the military, regardless whether you was Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, or Marines. There was no one there. So you came home. You went to Vietnam alone because you didn't go there as part of a unit. You went there as an individual. When you returned the same way. There was no marching band. And today, when someone goes into the military and they come back, they go over as a unit, they come back as a unit. Each one of those people, they know each other. When we went, we didn't know the person who was to our left or to our right or in front of us. But one thing we learned to respect that person because we realized that person could be the thing that kept us alive.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Totally different.
Totally different.
What about with your family life? Was it hard to get reacquainted?
It was hard because they didn't understand me and I didn't understand them. I thought that they were crazy because they didn't understand me, but it was an adjustment period because actually when I came back, I didn't realize my shortcomings. I didn't realize that I had some issues I had to deal with. I always thought there was someone else who had issues that they needed to deal with. And when someone would tell me, said, look, something is not clicking with you, something is not right, I'd always put it off and say, well, it's them, it's not me. And the day when I walked into the vet center, I realized it was not them, that was in fact me.
How many years later was that?
To walk into the vet center? Mm-hmm. About 40-some years later. And that's not unusual for us Vietnam veterans. But the very first time that I walked into this building, I realized that I was home. Because the experiences that I wanted, the experiences that I had, I found out they had the same experiences.
How is that helpful?
What, coming here to the vet center?
Right, and having people who share the same experiences.
Well, for me, the vet center is more than just a building. It is a location where we as veterans can come in and we can share similar type of stories and we can talk about things that we shared that other people would not understand. And now gives us an opportunity to look back and say, hey, do you remember this? Yes, I remember that. And this is the best thing that ever happened to me was walking inside this building. Because when I walk into this building, I know that I can find out about programs that the VA is offering. I know there's counseling that's going on here. And I know there's medical referrals that they do out of this building because I've benefited from all three of those things, maybe probably more than that. When I came into this place, I would tell people that I was a broken person. Even though I had a successful career, as veterans, we learn how to hide things that we don't want other people to see. And because we're afraid that if other people see it, it'd be a sign of weakness. But that's not really true. It takes a brave person to walk into this building and say, I need help.
Mm-hmm. You're so eloquent. You really have encapsulated it well. Mm-hmm. But to carry that for 40 years?
But we don't know that we don't realize the fact that we are carrying anything. We think it's you carrying something. You know, we don't look at ourselves. We look and say, no, they tell me that I'm this or I'm that. But we let it go in one ear and right out the other ear. And then one day, all of a sudden, it just comes to you and said, no, it's not them, it's me. And the very first time, like I said, I walked in this building, I felt like I was home. Because you got to keep in mind that for me, it's being a Vietnam veteran. No one told me welcome home. There was no parade, there was no cigar, there was no marching band, there was none of that. It was like a pat on the back, said welcome back, and we'll see you when you get to Fort Meade, Maryland. And I wasn't ready for that. Most of us veterans, in fact, were not ready for that. It played a tremendous impact on most of us as Vietnam veterans, because when you listen to all of us talk, most of us will tell you the same thing. And then we would say about the guys who went to other places like Afghanistan, Kuwait, and places like that. When they came home, the band was there, a military commander was there, their family members was there. They welcomed them home. Not even a senator or a congressman welcomed any of us home. We were never told thank you for the job or the service that we provided. Only in the last few years have someone come up and say, thank you for your service. Thank you for doing this.
And that was, am I wrong with this? Is that like the only war that happened? Because didn't that happen in Korea, World War I and II?
No. You got to keep in mind that when the troops came home from places like Germany, if they were in Germany, or they came up from Japan, it was always someone there to welcome them home, to say, thank you for your service, thank you for your time, thank you for your contribution. We, us Vietnam veterans, we didn't get that. There was no one there to tell us that. Because we went over as individuals, we came back as individuals, no one told us that, you know, thank you for your service. And then on top of that, people meeting you at the airport and calling you a baby killer. And I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was defending this country, you know, because we didn't hear about it on the Armed Forces radio station about what was taking place back here in the United States.
With the protest
I didn't encounter the protesters at the airport or anything like that. Yes, but we know there was protests that was going on across the country. You know, you had 50% who was in favor of the war and another 50% who was opposed to the war. So protests were protests.
Now, you talked before we started rolling about what was the pivotal moment that brought you to the Vet Center. Can you tell me about that again?
Sure. It was another veteran who came to me after I had an outburst, and he began to talk to me, and he said, "Look, you need to get yourself checked because something is not right. Something is not clicking." And from there, he told me, "Say you either go to the VA or you need to go to the Vet Center." And for a while, I just ignored it. And then when I was at a 911 program in downtown Richmond, and they played an audio tape of the attack at the Pentagon. And while I was there, something said I needed to go get help. And I've been here ever since.
What do you think it was about that audio recording? I'm sure it was profound.
I think it was because it was you could hear the person who was making the calls to 911 asking for help, calling for help. And that kind of touched home because during the time in Vietnam, you had incoming fire where someone was hollering, you know, and also hollering for help, you know, screaming for help and so forth. It was almost like the similar type of thing. And it kind of touched something within me, and I said, it's time for me to go get help for myself. And I did.
What is it that you find here? And do you meet with other Vietnam vets, or is it a multitude of...
The way the process started out was that when I first walked in the door, I met one-on-one with Ms. Hall. And then after several weeks, I was put into a group. I became part of a group. And all the people that's in my group, I think, are somewhere between 9 to 11 of us that meet. And we talk about everything from the first thing you have to do when we come in, we have to, what we call a checking in. You have to explain to another veteran how your week went. If it was good, you tell them it was good, and you tell them what you did good. If something went wrong, something was bad, you tell them what was bad. And a lot of times before Ms. Hall walked into the room, we're able to discuss that among the 9 or 11 of us to say, try this. And then if we can't help the person solve it, then when she walks into the room, then the person will bring it up, and then she will say, try this, this, and this.
That's
So it is. It's one of the best things that I can say.
Like, what would be a bad week?
A bad week for me right now, I would have to go back because I'm a better person now than I was a while back. But I've learned that some things that used to bother me, I learned not to let it bother me. I can honestly say that she's given all of us, when I'm talking about the guys in the Tuesday night, I refer to it as a toolbox. And within that toolbox, it's things that's inside that toolbox that when something is bothering me, I know how to reach in that toolbox and pull something out. I'm smart enough to know that if I'm really having a bad moment, call one of the other guys that's in my group and run something past them. And if something is bothering them, they may call me and run it past me. And if that does not work, then call Ms. Hall.
So you've got people who's got your back again?
Yes. Well, we have each other's back.
Right.
Yeah.
That's valuable.
It's very valuable.
Something about the peer-to-peer, people who've walked in your shoes. Talk about that.
It's good to have someone when we talk. We're in a group and we're talking about something. It's good to have somebody in that group who understands exactly what you're talking about, because sometimes we use language that if you were sitting in there, you wouldn't have a clue what we were talking about. And we can sit in there and we can talk about things, and we may use certain words that we picked up in Vietnam. We all know what those words mean. If you're an outsider, you wouldn't. So it's good for us to have someone in that room who truly understands exactly what we're talking about.
So how do you compare yourself now to the person you were before you walked into the vet center?
I'm a hell of a better person than I was when I first walked in. Because like I said, when I walked in the door, before I walked into the door, I saw the fault in you. I didn't see the fault within me. I didn't realize the problems that I was causing. You were the problem, not me. But then after walking in, discussing it with Ms. Hall and the other veterans in the group and so forth, we all came to the same conclusion that all of us were wrong. That the problem wasn't with the other people, the problem was within us. And sometimes when you do a self-assessment of yourself, that's the hardest thing to do, is to be truthful with yourself sometimes, because we only see what we want to see.
Right. Wow. What about with your family? Can you talk about that? What was it like when you came back after Vietnam, as far as your relationships with your parents or siblings?
My parents were both deceased.
Oh, okay.
My oldest brother was also a veteran of the United States Army. And it's funny that you would ask me about the family life, because my brother and I both came out on orders at the same time to go to Vietnam. He went to California. I ended up going to Fort Lewis, Washington. I got to Fort Lewis, Washington. They said, wait a minute, the Department of Army does not want to send both of you, even though they can. They're going to have to make a decision as far as which one of you to send. They sent me to Vietnam. They sent my brother to Germany. We came back approximately 3 or 4 days apart.
Wow.
Yeah.
That had to be an amazing reunion.
It was.
Now, he got you, right?
What's it again?
Did he understand you?
No, because he wasn't in Vietnam, and we had some difficult conversations when I came back, because he went to Germany and I went to Vietnam. So we had some difficult times, but we were able to get past that. Some things that you see in Vietnam, in any war, it never goes away. It's almost as like it happened yesterday. And I'll give you a prime example of something when I say that you never forget. Back at LZ Dottie, I remember this truck that pulled in. It was almost like it was a dump truck, or you may describe it as being a garbage truck. The guy came in, he asked us for 50 gallons of diesel fuel, or for diesel fuel, I should say. And we asked him what was he going to do with the diesel fuel, and he pulled the top up on the back of the truck. Well, when he pulled the top up, he saw the bodies of about 6 people in the back of the truck, and they were covered in maggots. And he was asked to get the people off of the highway, and he was going to take the diesel fuel and he was going to burn the bodies. That's what he was going to do. So things like that, when you see it, you don't forget it. It's like something that you see today and you forget about it next week. It's always there with you. Or when you see your friends get shot, or maybe one of your friends get killed, you don't forget about that. That never goes away.
I'm sorry.
It takes a brave person to walk into the door and say, I need help. But it's places like the Vet Center and the VA and so forth that I wish more veterans would take advantage of, because when you look at what's taking place within this country today, on an average of 20 vets a day are committing suicide. And when you sit there and you think about the use of 20 a day and you multiply it by 365, that come out to be over 7,000 veterans a year are committing suicide. That's an astronomical number. Those guys and those ladies need help. and a lot more has to be done to provide them with the help and assistance that they need. If they don't want to go to the VA hospital, go to the vet center and ask for help. I did it. And if can do it, they can do it too.
That's so important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you said that.
Mm-hmm.
Were you ever that low?
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that you find that they will ask you when you come here, or either when you go to VA. Have you ever had suicidal thoughts? Most veterans, if they're going to be honest with you, they'll tell you that they have. Anyone who tell you that they haven't, you need to take a serious look at them, because just about all of us have thought about it at some point in our life.
What kept you from following through?
I really don't know. You know, it could have been my faith that caused me not to do it. But all of us have had the opportunity. All of us have had weapons when we were in the military. Most of us have had weapons at home. And it doesn't always have to be a weapon if you really choose that you want to commit suicide. There's a million ways that a person can do it if they choose to do that. But what I would like to say again, go back and say, veterans who need help need to get the help that they desperately need. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
I
yeah.
really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I want to thank Ms. Hall for selecting me to come in here today. And she called me and she said, I want you to do this. And I said, no. She said, yes, you are. So here I am. I left Vietnam in 1970. Last year, I was able to get in contact with the guy who served in my unit, and we were friends in Vietnam. His name was Jack Cougar, or Cougar. First time we had talked to each other since we had left Vietnam, and since I had left Vietnam in 1970. And we reconnected through Facebook. And I'm not a Facebook person. And that's how we got in contact with each other. And I went up last year to see him for the first time since I left Vietnam. We sat in his backyard and talked for about 3 hours. And he pulled the trick on me. He told me, he said, yeah, man, I'm doing just fine, and so forth. And I got up and come to find out that he was not doing fine, that he was actually dying. And of course, what happened was he got cancer. One of the big things for Vietnam veterans is Agent Orange. And I would ask anyone who served in Vietnam, make sure they get checked to make sure that they don't have cancer. Prostate cancer is a big one. It's important to have those physicals done to make sure that they are doing okay. And I didn't know that he was sick, because he told me, man, I'm doing just fine. I'm going to the gym and I'm doing all this other stuff. And it wasn't true. And actually, he was under hospice care when I got to his house. But he was kind of afraid to tell me that because he thought that I wouldn't come. And I drove all the way up to Cleveland to see him. And 2 months later, I had to drive back to his funeral. You know, but I would stress to any Vietnam, but to any veteran, make sure you take advantage of those things that the VA can do, or go to your own doctor, but make sure you get checked to make sure you're cancer-free, or one of those other ailments, 13 or 15 ailments from Agent Orange, particularly if you served in Vietnam.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, when you really look back at it, is that during the era of Vietnam, there was no such thing as PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. You either had battle fatigue or you had something else they would call it, shell shock or something like that. And that's the reason why a lot of veterans, particularly from my era, would not walk into a place like this right here, because they'll be labeled as being weak by someone else. But no, you're not weak. You're brave to pick your feet up and walk into a place like this and say, hey, look, I need some help.
So what would you think? Like, oh, this is something I can shake, or just deal with it?
Well, that's what you were told to do, you know, just deal with it, because the same thing that I'm able to experience, other people may be experiencing the same thing. So you were told just basically, you'll be okay, deal with it.
Tamika described to us where she's hyper-focused or hyper-vigilante, she said, where if she sees litter in the middle of the road, she's like, well, there could be something in that. And she's just focused tunnel vision on that. Do you experience something like that where you're
I went through that at one point, and it's really funny how you brought that up, because when you said that, it kind of triggered something. When I first came back from Vietnam, I came back and my family was living in the west end of the city, close to a park that was called Bird Park. And I decided that after being in the house for about 5 days, because I didn't come out, I didn't want to be around people, and I didn't want people to be around me. I decided to just go for a walk in Bird Park. And when I went for the walk in Bird Park, there was a path that people would walk. And as I was walking down this path, there was a branch laying across the path, or a stick. And what did I do? I stopped when I got to the stick, and I took my hand and felt up beneath the branch because I wanted to make sure, in my mind I'm thinking that it was booby-trapped. And I wanted to make sure that it was not booby-trapped. And then all of a sudden something went off and say, "You're okay, you're back in the world." And then I just picked it up and threw it on the other side of the walkway. But in my mind, I'm still thinking I'm in Vietnam, and I'm still taking actions like I'm in Vietnam because I'm thinking that it was a booby trap.
Right. It makes sense.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to stop reacting that way?
It took a while. I couldn't tell you, how many months or how long it took me. But at that point, I realized that I was back in the world and that I was safe. Mm-hmm. And that's my story.
Yeah. And what an accomplished career you ended up having, too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for your service,
Okay.
too, and
Well, thank you.
with Richmond Police.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah.